All right, I believe we're heading to Carolina, right?
You are.
Cool. Well,
Right.
welcome, Andrea, from Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. And it's beautiful here today.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. It's actually pretty nice here in California, too. So let's enjoy it and welcome. Couldn't have a Leaders Who Care series without having you on it, right?
Thank you. Yep. It's great to be here with you and our mutual friends out there from the Fifth Element group. Miss
Absolutely.
them all.
We'll say hi to all of them. They'll see this. So why don't we start with if you could briefly introduce yourself, a little bit about you, family, stuff like that, and then we'll chat.
Sure. Sure. So my name's Andrea Connor, and I lead a organization called Stevenson Connor Global Strategies, focused on the gender multiplier effect and corporate social responsibility. Have two adult boys who are out there, the millennials that are keeping me honest on what's going on around the world, and my husband's a fellow Canadian like you.
Yep.
Big Montreal's Canadian fan, and just have had a great opportunity to live and work around the world. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell.
No, yeah, and there's a lot more. And I'd forgotten that it was a big. I knew it was Canadian. I forgot it was a big Montreal Canadiens fan. So we're gonna have to do some kind of Zoom call for sure.
Absolutely.
I've never
We've
talked.
even got the flag. We fly the flag out in front of our house for the Montreal Canadiens.
Oh man, okay, we're definitely talking because I got similar. We have to talk about the draft. We have to talk about all the stuff going on. So that'll
There
be
we go.
so Ed, if you're listening, which you will hopefully see this, let's get it on. Let's do it.
All right.
So, you have Simon Sinek with his why and all that, and I love Simon Sinek, but I'd like to ask you that in a little bit of a different way, Andrea. Basically, why do you do what you do?
You know what, Mark? I do what I do because I get energy from seeing other people thrive. Emerging leaders in particular, I think in some ways because I feel like it's a reflection of me and my journey as a first generation college student, and getting a passport at the age of 35, it just totally opened my world view, and being in these opportunities to lift others up and watch them thrive is a big driver for me. Empowering women in particular, and all the experience of being engaged with UN women and understanding why it's so important for us to lift up women and girls, and the ripple effect that has on our communities, our economy, and society as a whole. So I just like to see people, I like to see the underdog thrive.
Absolutely. So how come at 30, what did you do the minute you got the passport? Where were you going?
So my husband, Ed, the Montreal Canadiens fan, his job took us, we ended up moving 8 times in 13 years across 3 continents. So my first foray outside of the United States was Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, 2 weeks before September 11th, 2001. So not only did I have to learn how to navigate living in a foreign country, but I had to navigate the geopolitics. And so that it was a great learning experience about finding your authentic voice and using it to build relationships and foster collaboration, for sure.
He should have broken you in a little bit easier. Should have taken you up to Canada first and then
exactly. And then Kuala Lumpur.
Yeah, I mean that's a big jump right away. But that's fantastic. Well, I want to talk more about the gender multiplier effect, and et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been involved. Well, you've seen how brands and corporate leaders have realigned themselves to some degree, some greater, some not greater, with social impact, because they've realized that number one, they can attract and keep the best talent, which I work on with, but that's actually good for business also. So you got a lot of global experience, especially after 35, and you corporate nonprofits on boards, a lot of cool stuff. And again, like you said, around empowering women, women's leadership, diversity and inclusion, all those things that we all pretty well met around when knowing that SDG 5, if that's raised, everything else should probably raise. Can you
Yep.
share with us some of your experiences that you've seen, that you've felt, with corporate leaders, with government leaders, with influencers, and just people in different cultures in general?
Sure. Well, firstly, I think when you go into a culture that is not your own, you're an ambassador and trying to have those conversations. And certainly in places like Malaysia, it was understanding how can you bridge that gap. Why were people so angry about Americans at that time? How can I understand where they are? In Germany, it was a part of building a international school, bringing in the leaders from multinational corporations. This international school that we were building catered to students from 72 different countries. And how do you bring them in, have been partners from the government that were focused on what's good for Germany, and then you have your CEOs that were focused on what is good for their employees so that they'll want to come to these locations. And then, of course, you had the parents that were the expatriates and having their kids there. It was a really wonderful experience when you can center around a common goal and how successful you can be. And you can bridge across cultures that way by just having that common goal. And then, of course, with China, my experience of working with
Yeah, but
university.
they don't. They want to know.
Okay, so let me tell you. So I had this life-changing opportunity to work with university women in rural China and be a part of a leadership development program. By the end of the 3 years that we lived there, we hosted about 40 students in our Shanghai apartment to bring them out from their university, set them up with job shadow experiences and internships. And that's where, the leaders of these multinational corporations and businesses had an opportunity to give back and bring these students in, engage with them and help them flourish and thrive. And so I think that's where it's a great, leaders who care are looking at how they can influence that next generation. What kind of legacy are they going to leave behind and lift up the next generation? There are a couple of leaders out there. I'm a big fan of following the World Economic Forum and the corporate business roundtable and the policies that they're putting out now. And there's a big shift from stockholder value to stakeholder value, which I applaud. I think it's about time that we're looking at how does it impact everybody in the community, from the employee to the stockholder, to the greater community and the consumer.
There's a great documentary out, I don't know if you've seen it, called The Corporation.
You mentioned that. I have to watch it.
Yeah, it talks about, it's kind of funny, but the first corporation was kind of like you're talking about now, we're talking about now, and how it evolved from that to where we are now. And maybe we need to go back to basics type of thing. Yeah. And be more accountable for what we do. And so how did that lean towards or get you into just focus on women's leadership? What obviously you're a woman, you're a leader, but how did that happen?
Well, I think part of it is, of course, my mom's a fierce advocate for women, and she's an Athena Award recipient. So the organization called Athena International, who both you and I are familiar with, I was kind of brainwashed with those principles about, supporting and lifting up the voices that women bring to leadership. But when I had the opportunity to travel around in Southeast Asia and developing countries, and I saw the resiliency of women and as entrepreneurs and how they were trying to lift themselves up out of poverty and the impact that it had on their children, along with working with UN Women in Beijing and learning about the different initiatives and being a part of corporate gender and corporate social responsibility, gender and climate change, and gender and the economic empowerment of women. I knew that there was an opportunity to really have an impact by just helping women and girls find their voice.
So what do you think of Helen Reddy's I Am Woman song?
Oh, I love it. Actually, I had the students in Henan province that I was working with, had them all singing that song one day out in the session. Of course, English is not their first language, so some of the words didn't quite flow, but it was fascinating to watch them all sing it and take in the meaning of the words.
Yeah, I just happened. Leadership means vulnerability right now, right? So I have to admit, I watched the movie called I Am Woman on the weekend about Helen.
Oh.
It was done when she was still alive, but she's just passed away.
Yeah.
Which is probably why they got it on. But it's a great movie about her life and what she went through and the impact she made. And so that's why I mentioned. And I always loved her. Anyway.
Is that Netflix or which?
Yeah, Netflix.
Okay.
We're advertising Netflix. So Netflix, if you want to syndicate this series, just give us a call.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of great things on Netflix.
There are a lot of great real life movies. And so tell us a little bit more about what you mean by the gender multiplier effect.
So the gender multiplier effect, actually, I first became exposed to the multiplier effect as an economics major. And, you have a reaction and it creates a ripple across society. If you look at it from the lens of gender and you're empowering women and girls, it gives them the confidence to then step in to leadership and have a voice. And then the ripple it has across poverty, violence in communities, war in communities. If women's voices are a part of the conversations, then it has a stronger impact on the GDP of countries. When I was working at UN Women, one of the projects that they shared with me is the UN has a do no harm kind of clause. If they do invest in a project in a community, that they will make sure that it's right. One of a rural community, they had gone in and constructed a big bridge that was supposed to help with transit. Of course, they conversed with the village elders and all of that, but they didn't converse with the women. So what it did is it added a whole extra, like 3 hours to the day, because typically the women and the kids didn't have a motorbike or a scooter to get there. So they ended up having to go back in and create a bridge over so that it would allow people to get to the shopping and the school. Had they invited a woman to be a part of the conversation, they would have saved themselves some money.
They should have known, because, who's running the family, number one, and stuff. It's funny how some things are just so obvious, and whether it's policy or pure discrimination or, ignorance, we ignore them, deny them, whatever. I had a Deloitte partner that was an influencer of mine, and he said, brilliance is simple. And every year I get that more and more, that something as simple as, why didn't you just ask the women? Whatever, would have saved the.
I think it's not just gender at the table. I think it's diversity of thought.
Right.
Everybody is sitting around the table and they have the same opinion or experiences that you have. You get the same thing. So when you have diversity of thought, that's where innovation comes in. And that's, women represent 51% of the global population. So you would think you'd want to know from that perspective.
Well, I think the key words there is you would think.
Yes, you're right.
But yeah, well, finally, it's hard to believe that it's taken that long. We still got a ways to go. But so tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now with Stevenson Connor. How does that include gender equity, gender multiplier effect? And also what I'd like to ask you is, being in the talent acquisition business, if you will, myself especially, what I see is we place a lot of women in leadership roles, but it's critical that we have women going into the mid-management roles too, because who's going to succeed? So
absolutely,
you can address that, and would you see out there?
So, one of the initiatives, so recently I'm the immediate past president for Athena International, and part of what I was really focused on is, how do we get women's voices into leadership, and where is there that gap? And where it is in technology. We have been working on, in the 80s, women in computer science fields was actually pretty good. But for some reason, with all the investment that we have been making and all the conversations about getting women and girls into STEM fields, the numbers are going in the opposite direction. So I really wanted to take on that challenge. And a lot of the work that I'm focused on now is how do we get women's voices into the tech pipeline. One, working with Athena International to roll out an initiative called Athena in Tech. And we've partnered with another nonprofit called the WIT Network, which has members in 52 different countries. And how are we building that pipeline? Here locally in the Triangle, we're working with an all-girls public high school, and we have a tech leader, so women that are in the tech industry that are going in and mentoring, teaching about the principles of the Athena leadership model, which comes naturally to women, and helping create that interest. You have to see it to be it. If you've never seen a woman as an astronaut, then how can you imagine being an astronaut? If you've never seen a woman in technology make it into the C-suite, then how can you aspire for that? And I think that's part of what I'm really focused on, and what is the corporate social responsibility piece to that diversity conversation. I'm a huge fan of what Brian Moynihan is doing with Bank of America. They have been a partner with Vital Voices, with the Shri Blair Foundation, and they've really taken a strong initiative, not only to have diversity of gender, but diversity across their organization. I think when leaders are stepping up and saying that it's not okay for us not to be having these metrics within our organization, that's when you're going to see the shift. And that's why you're having all these, like the conference board and the organizations that are coming out with these shareholder or stakeholder metrics, is including the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And I saw that one of the tipping points was clients would ask me, why aren't we getting the best people? How can we get the best people, et cetera, et cetera. And for us, best people is, as you know, we talk about the right fit culture ad. It's not just right fit, because right fit doesn't just means that you're exactly the same. It's got to be adding to the culture. But one question I get asked by the smartest candidates, and almost every woman that will have for positions, is because everybody going for that position that we work is a really good person. They can all do the job. So what's the differentiator? But women want to know that they're not just going to be allowed to do their job. Are they going to be allowed to be on big projects and be involved in those projects and get a chance to show their stuff and have a say in it? Because that's the way you get noticed, if you will. And also that's the way you achieve. So to me, that's a big part, including in mid-management, for getting more and more people. It's because it won't do any good getting women in leadership positions, then there's no one to follow up afterwards. So.
And I think it also, the women that have made it to the C-suite, with success comes responsibility. Yeah. So we need to be working from a lens of abundance instead of scarcity. If there are 10 seats at the table, there's no reason that there can't be 10 women at that table. I still think a 50-50 diversity makes sense, because then you're getting at that balanced lens. But instead of there just being one seat at the table, we need to be focusing on, abundance. And then that goes all the way down, pulling the next generation up behind you. That's what I love working with emerging professionals, opening the door to something that makes them stretch outside their comfort zone. For me, it was that passport and going into all those foreign countries. I had no choice but to show up as my authentic self, because I was never going to fit in. And so you just have to, when you're stretching yourself outside your comfort zone, that's when you really have a chance to thrive and succeed and for women, it's in the C-suite in particular, it's getting that P&L responsibility, asking for those assignments.
Right. Asking for raises, asking for, just believing that you deserve it. And it, you remember the days when, what's the movie we talked about, RBG before, and she went for an interview and they asked her if her husband allowed her to get a job. So, I mean, holy Toledo. So we've come a long way, but it's kind of ridiculous. With respect to all that, what role do you see business leaders who care have to play for what I call, there's 3 or 4 pieces of well-being I usually see. There's the financial well-being, there's physical and the mental well-being, and there's even spiritual, which may come under mental. But what role do you see business leaders having to play to ensure that their talent, their people have that? And with respect to that, and realize that it still is good for business and it flows into the community too.
Well, I think allowing that people's voices are heard, and providing opportunities for that each person has a voice at every level of the organization and feels that they have the ability to lead. I really believe that you do not have to have a title to be a leader. You can be a leader wherever you are. And if that culture is cultivated within the organization, you're going to have people that are willing to step up and think outside the box. So I think leaders who care are going to be ensuring that the person that's standing in the corner that might be an introvert, that they're going to find a way to pull them in. I actually had one of my oldest son tell me one time that one of my gifts is that I find that person that is not engaged and I pull them in. And I thought, oh, he's so right. Because I find like the wallflower. And I think that's just important to give everybody a voice, because they're observing. I mean, if you're not talking, you're really paying attention to what's going on. And that's where you get some of the best intel of what's really happening.
You do. It's a great point, because we did a diversity test once. First of all, you have different cultures. And in this diversity test, there was a meeting. There's a woman in charge of the meeting. And there was another woman, there was a black man, I think, and another person, a new employee from Iran or somewhere in the Middle East. Long story short, she was talking during the meeting and whatnot. At the end of the meeting, she goes to the African-American guy and said, "What's wrong with Amin?" I don't remember his name. Amin. He's not talking, he's not doing this and that. Go talk to him. And first mistake she made was not setting the scope of the meeting. Then she has someone else go talk to him. Long story short, he goes to talk to him and he said, "Well, where I come from, you don't interrupt the speaker and you don't interrupt the woman." And on and on. And I had a lot prepared, and she's ready to fire the person because he didn't do anything.
I love that culture. Where was he from that they don't interrupt the woman? I love that. We need to institute that here. I'm telling Ed that that's the new rule.
What was Kamala's favorite line? "I'm speaking now."
Yes.
Great line. So yeah, it is interesting. Pretend I'm a graduate, high school, college, whatever, and we're talking, and I say, my girlfriend's pissed off at me. She knows it's not my fault. There was no prom, but she's still pissed off at me. And we didn't party like we wanted to, this and that, and the economy, I don't know where. And I come up to you and I say, what do I do now? What's next? What would you tell me?
I would tell you to listen. Ask her what's really at the heart of that's bothering you. And
not just about her, in general, what I should do next. Like
in society, explore, learn, find opportunities to learn, to embrace the new challenges that are out there, leverage your network, foster collaboration across various industries. That's really what I tell a lot of the young people that I work with is, what are you afraid to try? And then let's find a way for you to try it, to give it a go.
Super cool.
Stretching outside your comfort zone is where you learn the most. And if you fail, you've learned something. So it's really not a failure.
It's a great example. I couldn't remember the name of the movie, but there's a movie about this Nigerian young lady who played chess. Do you know that?
I've heard about that. I haven't watched it yet.
I haven't watched it. It's been a little while now, but I'm meaning to watch it. Again, long story short, she started getting good at it. Then she got someone teaching her. She got better at it, and then she won stuff. And then she started going international. And they asked her, "Well, how do you win all the time?" She says, "I don't win all the time." "So you lose?" She said, "No, I don't lose." "Well, how can you win and lose?" She says, "Well, I win and I learn," basically. And it's brilliant, brilliant remark. So every time I talk to you, I learn, and you are definitely one of the leaders who cares. So thanks a million for sharing with us today, and we'll do
Thanks
it.
for having me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure.
Look forward to continuing to watch this series. I've learned from some really amazing people along the way. So keep it up, my friend.
Yeah, there's some good ones. I've been fortunate enough, and there's more. And I guess we'll have to get your husband Ed on one just to talk hockey.
There you go.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.